from the Monash Library. They'll talk to you more about their roles, but Janet McGarry and Ayako Rankins, you'll see them there, and they're going to take the class for the first 90 minutes. I'll still be here, and I'll be chatting, maybe interrupting, maybe answering questions. You're very welcome to ask them questions at any time, and please do. And also you can write your queries in the chat if you want to, and they'll be asking you for your questions. This is a great chance to get 90 minutes of one-on-one time with not one but two subject specialists from the library. And so then after they've finished in about 3:30 Melbourne time, we'll then have a 15-minute break. So just one break today, but a little bit longer. And then we'll come back to class after that. And for the last part of today's tutorial, we'll be looking at the assessments in detail. And I'll be talking, adding to what Janet and Ayako have said about research, and just reminding you of the resources and so on that they've talked about today. So we're looking at assessments, and then we'll get on to this week's topic, political economy, a little truncated this week, but we will look at the Eli Noam reading late today as well. So I'll now hand over to Janet and Ayako. A very big welcome from us, and thank you so much for coming into the fourth class of the week for us.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, hello everyone. As Karan said in the introduction, my name is Janet McGarry, and I'm the Arts Faculty Librarian at Caulfield. And my colleague Anako is my counterpart at Clayton, but her speciality is Japanese studies. So that's her key expertise, and we share her with Melbourne University. But I'm now going to share my screen, and you don't want to see that. Today we are mainly addressing the content of this module that you looked at last week. So did you have any questions stemming from that? Anything that didn't quite make sense, or you want clarified? Nothing there that was just, what on earth did that mean? No? Well, that's what we are basically addressing. There is also a worksheet loaded there, which you might not have seen last week. This is just a guide to get your thought processes going in relation to your topic, your essay topic. We are going to focus on essay topic number 4 today. Ayako will show you this essay topic. We're not recommending that it's a topic you do, it's just one that we decided to do some searches on. You will need to know where you're going to look. You will have to understand the concepts within your essay, because they're multifaceted, but I know that you're going to be talking a lot more about that in your tutes. Also, in this resource, I hope you can see it clearly. Anyway, it's loaded in your Moodle. Just have a go at keywords and a search strategy. Ayako is going to run through search, the library's key resource discovery tool, and then we're going to move on to the discipline-specific databases, and there's a fair bit of content in the interim, like evaluating resources and tips for creating a useful search strategy. So I will stop sharing now and hand over to Ayako.
Hello everyone. I would like to mention about the just a highlight from what you have done last week. Highlight about the Boolean operators and some useful operators that you can use when you're searching. So I'll highlight a bit, and then I will mention about, demonstrate about library search and some Google Scholar. So that will be my part. I will take the one of the essay topic of number 4 about the contemporary digital communication systems offer greater diversity and plurality of information and content flows than traditional media, critically discussed with reference to evidence and examples. So we'll take this topic as an example when I go through. So first of all, I like to show my share the screen of my one of the screen, if you can see it. So this is the Boolean operators. Most search and databases allows you to combine different keywords using Boolean operators. Boolean operators is the word of using or and. So it's the combination of using terms, and you can put these two different keywords in between the two words. So for example, if you use the or with two different keywords in between, it's the idea to broaden your search by combining similar words, and it finds either of the words in your search results. And on the other hand, if you use the word and in between the two words, it's the idea to narrow your search by combining completely different words, and it will find both words in your search results. So you can narrow down further. So these are the two main ones that you can use. There are some other useful operators that I've listed. There are 3 here. One is to use an asterisk mark at the end of the stem word. For example, if you put the asterisk mark after the environment, this will pick up several different ending of the environment and all the possible words that you might not think about it. So it's quite useful if you put the asterisk mark at the end of the stem word. The second one is you can use the double quotation marks. If you have a string of words that you want to find in your search as a phrase, you can put around the double quotation around the words, and that will bring this phrase search. And the third one is you can use the question mark. This is something like replace a single word, or it's like a wild card, and it picks up the alternative spelling, like American spelling or English spelling. So if you put the question mark there as an example, it will pick up the S or Z for the globalization. So if you use these techniques cleverly, your search become really powerful. So just to remember those one when you do the searching.
Ayako, I was going to ask you, because these are so useful, particularly, that the different forms of globalization, even within our unit, sometimes it's spelt with a Z, as you say, in the American way, and sometimes as an S in the British way. But I was going to ask you if all libraries and all databases use these Boolean operators and these other useful operators, or if it's just our library. I know some others do, but is it common, and is it on search machines as well?
Well, the common one is these Boolean operators, the and or. This one is mostly all the databases, including the library search. This will be used. Under the 3 example of other useful operators, these are slightly different from database to database. What database you will use, it's slightly different rules they have. So I will recommend you can try to use it first and see the results is, but every time you first try the new database, there is a help section or search tips. They have a section that the database explains what kind of rules they do. So I recommend every time when it's the first time to use the new database, do check the help page or search tips. and you'll find the rules there.
Thank you. And I just wanted to mention where you said the double quotations as well. I've noticed you need double quotes in, say, Google or whatever.
Yeah.
And just to differentiate that, it's not the same as using single quotes, even though with the Harvard style referencing, you'll be using single quotation marks, unless they're quotation marks within quotation marks, but normally quotation marks. But you have to remember to use the double quotation marks, right, in a search.
Yes, that's right.
Which can seem a bit strange, but
yes, yeah, it's just
they're not interchangeable.
for the searching. Yeah, it's slightly different when you are citing and actually writing in following the citing and referencing rule. Yeah, so this is a rule for just for searching. Yeah. Yes, that's really great questions. Yeah, it's you will find more once you get used to searching, and yeah, every time you use different database, it's all different. So it's best to check it out first. The next part I like to mention is after you do all the searching and you will find lots of different sources. Now the next part is very important to go through the evaluation process. This is because you find it in the sources, but you have to, it's best to check with this is a very easy one. It's called ABCD checklist. And A for author, B for bias, C for content, and D for date. So every time you find a source and you think it's good, but it's really good to go through the content and see if it's for example, is the author or the organization is responsible for the information? Does the author have any qualification of writing this article? Then you can look into the bias if it's an original research, or is there any is this based on evidence research? You can check by if the article, for example, have a reference list at the end and see if it's supporting the document. And also you can check if it's peer reviewed and check by the experts, for example. And then you can look into the content and see if it's a quite detailed article. It has, normally it will have kind of multiple page long, and check the body and see if it has a good argument or have any conclusion. And lastly, it's always important to check the date, because you have to see if it's recently published or if it's historical information. It could be any updates about that topic. So all this evaluation process, this checklist is important to go through before you use into your writing. So the next thing I like to mention is like to go to the library search. So I'll just need to stop sharing first, and then I'll just need to go for how you can find the library search. So have anybody used the library search so far? No? Is it a first time? Haven't used it yet? Well, it's a good place to start, because you can find lots of scholarly sources for your assignment. And the library has more than 3 million physical items, and many are available online that you can read from your computer. So to get to this library search, you can type in Monash University Library to get to the library homepage from any search engine. But if you happen to be in the My Monash, I'll just start to share the screen. So this is the My Monash page. So if you see up here, there's a library tile. So you click on this library tile. There's lots of information underneath here, how to get to more for library services and functions. But just up here, you can see the search. So you click on this page for library search. Next, I like to highlight that it's very important to first sign in. Sign in item is here. The reason I say this is why it's important to sign in is if you sign in, that means the library search will recognize you as a Monash student, and then it allows you to use more service and functions. More service means something that if you're borrowing books from the library, you can check your borrowing status and it will tell your due dates. And if there is a book that you found in a different campus, or if it's currently borrowing, you can place a request, or you can put it on hold. Instead of going to the different library, you can actually ask the library to bring it over to your own home campus library, which probably is Caulfield Library for you, most of you. So yeah, there are good service and functions that you can use.
Ayako, I just wanted to mention that that it's not enough just to be signed into My Monash. I got caught on this just yesterday, even after your class is saying, make sure you sign in. See, staff are still caught because you quickly go to the library and you think you sign in, but you're really not. You need to sign in separately, right? So
yes,
that connects you, because I then, without signing in, but thinking I'd signed in, I went to look to do a search and I thought, why is this not working properly? Why can't I get these articles? Then I remembered, you have to sign in every time separately.
Yep. So that's very true. So, and it's very easy to forget because you want to start searching. So what you do is you click on the sign in, and the first one is your student's login. So I'll just click on that first one, and it will go through my sign-in page. I can see my name at the very top right here. So that means you are signed in. So with this sign-in, you can have services and functions such as, if you go through, I'm going to demonstrate the search example, but when you find the interesting item, you can save your items in your folder. There's a folder in this function, and you can save your search set as well. So later on, if you want to check again, you can still find what you have searched. So yes, make sure that you sign in. So here, there is a box here, but I'll just want to show you the advanced search here. It's just because there are several boxes that I can put in, and because I talked about the Boolean operators, and it's easy to show you here with several boxes. So with the topic 4, I like to, well, before, like, you have a topic, and then like Janet has showed you the worksheet. That's a very good worksheet that you can start putting in before you actually do the searching. You need to have lots of time of brainstorming and thinking about different keywords, different words that you may think, and just put it in that the worksheet, and put as many as keyword that you can think, and from that worksheet you can actually come in to make a search here. So as I said, it takes quite a long time to come up with keywords. It's very hard to get a good result with one go. You need to try again to get to what you're looking for. So that's the warning before the searching. So make sure that you have lots of time of doing that. So just because I prepared for this one, I want to look for the words from the topic 4 is social media and traditional media. I like to look for those 2 keywords. And because I want to compare those 2 medias, I came up with the word something comparison, and something similar word like challenges, difference, versus. Those are the keywords that I want to put it in with combining the word or. So I will put it in here with the traditional media, and I also want to use the double quotation as a phrase search. And this is the part that the Boolean search that I was talking about. So I would like to select the and then the next one I like to combine with the sorry, the first one should be the social media. So 2 words: social media, traditional media, and then I like to put the words comparison, differences. So I can add a new line here. And comparison, challenges, differences, and versus. So I put 1, 2, 3, 4 similar words together and combine with the ors. And all these 3 keywords, 3 sets, I want to combine with and search. So here you can see it's small to see when it becomes long, but you can see underneath here what I have written down. So with this search, I will do the first search by clicking here. So now I've got 30,000. You'll get often quite a lot of results, and because the word is pretty broad, you'll get quite a lot of results. So what I can do from here is on the left-hand side, there's refine my results. And here is the section that you can narrow down bit by bit of what you want to have. So for example, on the left-hand side, there's availability. They have listed peer-reviewed journals, that many, has full text online, the items that are available in the library. Further down, there is a resource type. There are articles, newspaper articles, book chapters, and if you click on show more, it will show furthermore. So this is from the result of 30,000 that I got, and they're divided by what type of resources they are. So if you want just the books, you can click on the books. If you want videos of that topic, you can find from there. So here at the moment, I like to select the peer review journal because that's academic, so I'll tick on that. And then I also want to limit by articles only, so I first tick those 2 and apply for filters. And so after that, underneath I will have a little bit less result than before.
And I wanted to say that thank you for reminding me that to tick articles only, because otherwise you'll get book reviews and short notes and that sort of editorials, that sort of thing in journal articles that are part of a journal but not something that you want to use.
Yes, that's correct. So you can choose from the left-hand side by the resource type for that reason. And then further here, you can look into the yellow bit is the one that I have put in the keyword. So you can see that article title, and the next line here is the journal title or the source name. So those are important to check because I said that the search term is still very broad. So sometimes I can see it has my keyword, but this is more for something infectious diseases topic. The next one, for example, it's I can see the article, but it's something the journal in the body image or something. And so you can quickly glance through the list, but another thing I can do is still use my left-hand side to refine my result. There is a topic bit over here. So if I click on the topic, it will show all the different topics, including the communication, the mass media, something for more of your interest. So I will try to limit by communication topic, 9,000 something, but it will go down to 2,000. Now getting less and less, but it's not necessarily means that it's the item that I'm looking for. So other thing you can still limit down is the publication date here. So if you click on the publication date, and if I want something like recent one, I can change this from 2018, for example, and up to now, only the recent one I want can refine here. So just click on the refine, and that will narrow limit that it will be less articles coming up. So, but there's still more. So the last bit is you still need to look for the title, check the journal title. Because I already selected peer review, I think it's quite good, and you just need to go and look through the title. After here, I would like to, if you come across anything that you are interested in, for example, this article, to see more, you can click on this title, and it will bring further more details other than just that title and a little bit of information. So underneath here, if I scroll down, save as, view online, citation, under details, it will tell you more the actual article title, who wrote this, or who are they who wrote this article. There's a link that it will click. If you click on the links, you can find the person's other sources as well, which is quite useful. There's a subject link. If you think this is really good, there you can click on the social media or economic news. These are the subject. Subject means something description of the article itself. Very short keywords. So there are many other sources that have the same subject. So if you find this article very useful, you can click on and to see more of those subjects, same subject. Underneath here is that's the journal title. It says when it's published, what is the volume number, issue number, pages. It becomes very important once you find a good one that you need to note down somewhere. Anywhere is fine, but you just need to note down somewhere to get back to the article again. And the next other thing important here, they have a description. This is something like an abstract, and you can read quickly through the description and see if it's really important for your assignment topic or not. And so save your time instead of just going straight to the book text. You can just read the description and see, decide whether you want it or not. So yeah, these are the part that is good to check. Other than that, if you want to happy to read online, you can click on the online access. You can also have a download PDF option. And also, I mentioned about the journal title, like here, communication research. If you click on view issue contents, that means this will take you to the communication research, and you can see other issues or the same issues. If you click on this, it will bring to that journal, and it will show you other articles in the same issue. Because often journals have similar topics in the same issue, so it's good to check what the other ones are talking about. So that's one function that you can use. That's all about the library search. Quick one. If there are any questions about another option apart from library search. You can use Google Scholar as another way of looking for academic resources. So to get to the libraries, the Google Scholar, you can go into the Google Scholar by searching by normal search engine. But if you go through there, you might come across, they will say, well, this article I want to read, but they might ask you to pay. And you don't need to pay for those ones because Monash University Library has so many subscription of database buying it, and you don't need to pay through the Google Scholar. So I would recommend you all, if you want to use the Google Scholar, come to the library homepage, and there is a place that you can go through the Google channel. And once you come to the Monash channel, that means the Google Scholar recognize you as a Monash student, and you don't need to pay anything. So to get to the library homepage, same as the My Monash library tile, there's a library homepage. You can come through any search engines to get to this page, but in the middle, under here, there is a Google Scholar channel. So make sure that you click on this Google Scholar and type in any keyword that you have. So I'll do the same search. Social.
This is really great, everyone, because going through Google Scholar normally, as Ayako said, you come up against paywalls, and then I used to do it where then I would go back into the library and search for the article and find it. But this is like so quick that you're actually in Google Scholar, but as a subscriber paid to virtually everything. It's quite virtually everything that is possible to get, all of the communications, journal articles, and so on. And Google Scholar is good because it will mostly take you just to the, as Ayako said, the scholarly articles, whereas if you do just a normal search, you get everything, all sorts of things, and it's hard to even tell sometimes, particularly if you're a little bit inexperienced. Those of you who are not used to looking for communications journals, you might be confused as to what something actually is. So this is just a fantastic, this is one of the greatest things the library's done for me, because it's not ancient technology. That having Google Scholar there, it's relatively recent. So I just encourage everyone, but to remember, you have to be signed in. So if you're not signed in, like me yesterday, it would just take you to the normal Google Scholar. You want to be behind that paywall so you can access everything, and do that by signing in.
I just put in the keyword, and make sure that you click on the Google Scholar, and you just go for a search from here. And it will bring quite a lot of sources coming up. There might be some duplicates between library search and Google Scholar, but I will recommend you, just in case, make sure that you get every information, all the sources, try both. Google Scholar, library search, and later on that Janet will talk about database. Those three are very important to check. So this is the Google Scholar. It will bring the titles up here, article title, and the authors here, and the source name, journal title name. They have a less function compared to library search. On the left-hand side, you can only limit by time, which is the publication date. Yes, and also like Google, what you put in the keyword also change the structure. So the function at the moment, it looks like the year or the time, and the relevance is the one that you can refine at this stage. Up on the right-hand side, you can see by clicking all this on the right-hand side will guide you to the Monash Library channel, so you can read them or check. They will go through the library search, and it will check for you, but eventually it will guide you to the full text. Not all of them, but most of them we have purchased. So other thing I want to mention here is the Google Scholar have a great function called may be relevant for you. So if you click on the cited by, there are 308 sources or articles have actually used this social media, traditional media and music sales published in 2014. So these 308 items are all published after 2014. So if you find one article very interesting, you can chase up the most updated information from this one. I would also like to mention about normal Google or any other search engines. They are also very useful. They have lots of good information, but as you know, the internet, the website, anybody can load it up and put information in, and anybody can say this is a great source. So it becomes really important for you to check by your own eyes. Again, when I mention about the source, the checklist evaluation process becomes really important when you are dealing with websites. So back again to, I want to bring back to the going to share again with my screen for the website checklist. So evaluation process for website. Yes, again the same step, author, bias, content, date become really important to check for the website. As I said, there are good sources like educational organization or governmental websites. There are some good ones, but it's best to check with your own eyes following by this checklist. So, for example, check the author. Is it an author or organization responsible for the information? Does the author have credentials? Or what's the website domain? Is it a .edu or .government one? Very important to check. Also, going to further into the contents, it's important to check, is that one viewpoint or is that opinion expressed? Is this a fact information or is it just opinion presented? Why this site is there? Is it informed for entertainment or is it persuading or to sell? Those lots of things that you need to think about why the website is there. And you need to go through the content to see how well the information is covered and whether there is any evidence supporting the information there. And lastly, of course, the date. Is that the latest information or are there any information still out there? These are the ABCD checklists that is important for you to check, especially for websites. So that's my part, and I'd like to hand over to Janet from talking about the database. Over to you, Janet.
Well, thank you, Ayato. I know that was a lot of information, and we're going to be throwing a lot more information at you as well. What we're going to do is look at some other resources, some databases that are particularly relevant to communications and media. So I'm going to show you perhaps another way of approaching them. There are many ways to get to the library resources. Let's get this out of the way. So as you saw with the Google Scholar searches and library search, you get results. You can get results on topic, even though we were doing very broad searches. But search does not retrieve all the holdings. So you need to be aware of other databases. And we have many, but I'm just going to demonstrate two of you today. There were three mentioned in the module, all very useful databases. So you could refer back to that module if you're thinking, oh, what were those databases? Now, I've scrolled down from the library homepage to this tab under Resources and Skills Library Guides. Now, this is a page that is full of links, but if you've got some time, just have a quick browse. There's some excellent guides here. One that I think you'll be using quite a lot under Essential Skills is citing and referencing, and we'll look at that a little bit later. There's some other really useful databases too, including a grey literature one, which is regarded as non-scholarly material that is very useful for research, and we'll look at some of the better sites, Australian sites, a little bit later on. So I am on this library guides page, clicking on arts. As you can see, there's lots of disciplines studied in arts, but the one of interest to you will be communications and media. Now, it's sort of a concise introduction and guide to the resources. It's sort of curated to make it a little bit easier for you. And I'm going to look at the databases and journals. Now, here is a list of key databases. We're going to look at this one in particular. And when I speak about many, many databases, these are relevant too. A few of these are more relevant to our international students, perhaps from China. We have quite a few databases that have good quality content from China, and Ayako might speak a little bit more about that if we have time. But this is one of the key databases, Communication Mass Media Complete. Now, is it a small one actually, because it just contains the content of 600 journals, and in the range of databases, this is a small one. But you need to know about it. You need to have a look at it for your essay topic, no matter what your essay topic is. You would start with library search, and then you need to ensure that you're doing a comprehensive search. You need to move on to these other resources. There's lots of search refiners. I'm not going to go into them. The one that I did point out in the other sessions was, because I'm an English speaker, many of you are far more talented than myself and are multilingual, you may want to limit it to English, because there are items in other languages, but predominantly European languages. Plenty of search filters, which is pretty common in all of the databases. Some are more sophisticated than others. This is a very easy one to use. Initially, don't bother about this. I don't think your essay topics are going to involve drilling down this far, but it is an option. These are some of the Boolean operators that Ayako mentioned. Not is rarely used. It's used more commonly in the medicine databases, so I don't know that you'll need to use this. One instance that you might is, I'm going to do a search, and I'm going to also include social media as a phrase. That would be one of the few times I would use not, because social media is so all-encompassing. If you're going to use social media, of course you can. You might want to do a search on a type of social media, Twitter or blogs or something like that, because with the use of the term social media, results increase dramatically. But of course, social media is vital today, and maybe you can't eliminate it. I'm going to change this to all, because my first concept is traditional media or print media, because print media is traditional media, superseded in some ways, you might think, or not. Now, digital media, this is where digital media can take you often into resources that are IT based, and a lot of material will come up that has an IT focus. There's lots of journals, so just always be mindful of the sources and your terms. But be flexible. It's very important to be flexible. It doesn't matter that that's an uppercase. Now, here we go with the social media. Now, I do want to, one of the points of that essay number 4, which I meant to show you again, is the differences. How are they faring? How is print media, print news media faring in this digital age? So we really need to use many alternate terms, and I'm going to go for this. You see, there's the similar words, similar keywords, just to retrieve as much as we can.
Janet,
Yes.
before you click the search, social media has to be correct.
Oh, sorry, I didn't correct it properly, did I? Thank you.
I had a question, Janet.
Yeah.
When it's coming up with usefully with benefits or advantages or positive effects, will that be the same for everyone, or is that coming up with that because you've looked at those search terms before, or is that just...
Well, I've looked at similar search terms, and you'll note I've looked at similar search terms, but some of the databases will offer suggestions, and sometimes they are very helpful, very useful, on topic, and sometimes they're just going to steer your research, your concepts in a different direction. A lot of the terms are coming up because we've used this database quite a lot. You might want to see, why wouldn't, for instance, why hasn't the database put positive effects like this? It hasn't done that.
For everyone, or does it just come up, is it kind of a smart finder that looks at what you've personally looked for before? Or would it come...
Both.
Okay.
Both. It does both. It does both. But it will make this resource and even the next one will do that for you too. So you have to quickly evaluate, is this going to be useful or not? We have got many, not exactly on our topic, so you will need to keep scrolling. But what you will notice is the name of the journals. You're a little bit safe here. All right, Journal of Academic Marketing Science. There is a little bit of the marketing focus, but it is still a key communications media journalism database. And if we change the search terms, our results will change dramatically too. I'm going to go to peer reviewed because you need to probably rely on this, so the database will retrieve, it will refine the search to eliminate some of those articles that are from journals that are not totally peer reviewed. But that said, the content in this resource and the other one I'm going to show you, and the third one, Taylor and Francis from your module, they are good, reliable databases.
Yes, particularly when you're looking for your 5 sources for your annotated bibliography, you will only be looking at scholarly, peer-reviewed journal articles, so it's well worth remembering to tick those boxes so you don't get other things that are irrelevant. When you're doing your essay, you'll be also looking for a wider range of scholarly sources, but you'll also be able to use some of that grey literature that Janet will tell you about, and also some media sources. So it's not so crucial, but still, but particularly for the annotated bibliography.
And especially using that term social media, that's where you'll get a lot of educational focused journals too. So this particular database will help you to eliminate that. Let's just look at one. Let's try this one. You can obviously get the full text. You shouldn't have any problem getting full text from here. Now these are the important subject terms that can be really helpful. This one's come up because of social media. We're not doing an educational focus here. here, but depending on the direction of your essay, the focus, because they're quite general, but you're going to have lots more discussion about that from Karan. But facilitated communication, well, I certainly didn't think of that. So this is how you can get little bonuses, if you like, from the databases. One other thing I want to show you is this citing option. As Ayako said, and it is really, really important that you keep a record of everything that you look at. Even if you ultimately do not use it, you do not include it in your assignment, it is very helpful to have it put in a Word document or a Google Doc or however you save things, because you will need to put in your reference list and know how to cite in text correctly, and you need all of these components. You will notice that there will be these search options, not in every resource. This database does it, and search does, but you can see there's a warning. Pay special attention to capitalisation. Notice the use of that Z, and dates, and consult library resources. So we'll scroll through this. Lots of different styles, most of them use Monash. Oh, terrific, you think, I've got to do Harvard. Oh, Australia. You still need to check this against the Harvard referencing guide that if you haven't seen yet, I'll take you to it. But you need all of these components, maybe even this URL, maybe. Keep this somewhere, put it in your Word doc, because at least you've got the authors, the name of the article, the name of the journal it was published in, but you're not going to use that one, I don't think. Volume number, issue number, page number.
It's really good advice to start straight away. So many students at all levels that I talk to just, say, oh yeah, I'll just write part of the name down, I'll get it later, I'll do that, later on, I'll remember, and then it gets to invariably, the last day when your assignment's due, and actually doing the citations properly is something that can take hours and even days. So you actually make it much easier for yourself by not only transferring it to even just a Word doc or whatever, but I also suggest in the Harvard style, I also would suggest going to the guide that Janet will tell you about and putting it in the proper Monash Harvard style straight away, and also listing them in alphabetical order. So, you can easily do that on a Word document. Just don't put them all in higgledy-piggledy. Look at, okay, this author's name, first author starts with an A, so they go before the one I've already listed with a D. It doesn't take you very much time when you're doing it, but believe me, at the end, it just saves you many, 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 many hours. And particularly if you go on, this seems small, there's 5 for the annotated bibliography, and maybe 20 to 30 sources. But, if you go on in your studies, which we're also training you for, say to a PhD, when I did my PhD, I had 30 pages in the reference list, 30 pages of references. Can I tell you, if I hadn't have kept good records all the way along, this would have been a complete and utter nightmare, especially in those days when we didn't have any sort of way of automating the databases easily. So it's good to get into these good practices straight away if you're not already in them.
Yes, thank you, Carol. That's really important.
Janet, you're muted.
Oh, what have I done? I'll be back soon.
Maybe I touched something, I don't know. Anyway, you're back. Okay.
I'm back. Sorry. Yes, it's really important what Karan's saying, because, as she said, students will actually say, they will say to you, this reference list is taken almost as long as the assessment. So yes, take heed, take notice. The other database that I did want to show you is this Sage Journals Online. Now, a very good quality database. Now, some of the articles in Sage and Communication and Mass Media Complete may appear in library search, but you still just to even prove that you've done intensive and good quality research. This is why you need to have a look in these databases and some others if need be. This is the other one that was mentioned in the module. It's a really good one too. I'll show you how to limit to the communication subset from Sage Journals Online. Now, I hope my screen isn't too small for you. As you can see, discipline hubs are there. We'll be going for this one fairly obviously. Social science and humanities are going to go down here, and we are going to choose obviously communication and media studies. Sorry if this screen in the print is really, really small. And we will get a list. This is a list of the journals that, there's more of course, that are communication focused, and you can see journalism focused, media, and probably a bit of public relations as well. We can't select them all, which is a bit of a pity. So, but there is a way to refine it, another step. So you do your search, maybe advanced search, whatever you prefer. Just enter your search terms. I'm just going to do another very, very general search again, along with the traditional versus print media type thing. Oh, see, there you go. Now the reason that is there is solely because we have been doing searches in Sage quite a bit. When you start, you'll have to put in your key terms. I'm only going to do the first line, but for you to unpack your topics and your concepts, you don't have to, but you'll probably use multiple lines. So let's just see where that takes us. Search refiners, but they're fairly obvious. The only thing I didn't mention to you, if you see in databases, select full text, that's usually under the peer-reviewed option. I think it's best not to do that. It's very tempting because you think, oh, I want full text, but you might miss out on some other articles from that database that you wouldn't ordinarily get because you would just follow this rather small check for full text link. So that's why I am saying don't choose that option, or it's best not to. You can see our results, and see where they're coming from.
I'm just noticing something there. It said, I think it was the second one about Brazilian elections.
Yes.
So it's easy to say, no, I'm not doing that, I won't look at that. But sometimes as a comparison, or you can use something that's in a specialist area, you can still use it in your own essay, and that they might say something that you can apply more widely, or that you could use as a comparison, something like that. So do consider those sorts of articles if they seem to be on the topic that you're doing, but maybe they're just in a different area of the world. And keeping in mind that we are looking at globalization, so we're interested in comparisons with different areas of the world.
And if your topic, your concepts, please correct me if I'm going down the wrong path, but if you decided that this particular essay topic, you wanted to focus on politics, election campaigns, how traditional and print media and all the digital media are especially with some of the election campaigns around the globe in recent times, there's your use of an article like this, or even more recent elections. But then up here in your search refiners, you would put and political campaigns. You would add those words, or political campaigns or politics. But when when you're refining your topic, you'll probably decide fairly soon with lots of guidance from Karon. So obviously you're really interested in, there's lots more, you're really interested in this cluster, this subject cluster. Just to reinforce that. There will be probably some excellent, I'm picking at random. This is a well-known journal, a good quality journal. You've got the abstract, as Ayako said, you've got related articles that any advice or any tips that the database will provide. It's only a couple of seconds glance to see what's useful or not. Keywords for this particular article, not your search, and the reference list is very important. And one advantage of this particular article is that it's hyperlinked, so you could go straight to the item in the reference list as well. So there it is, all the components. That's not Harvard style though.
Sorry. Also, if you see something that comes up in a search like this, and say it is quite old, say it's from 2010, just take a note of the authors, because it's likely that an academic author will have written another article since then, and it might be on the same topic, but just updated. So it's a good way of seeing who's writing in the field, and you can also click on the author and often be or do a search on the author and find out which university they're at, that sort of thing. But yeah, have a look at their research profile, or just do an author search in one of these databases, or through Google Scholar, because I often do that and often find that they've done something 10 years later that's an update, or they've done some collaborative work with someone else.
Yes, that's an excellent tip, because then you can develop quite a bit of knowledge in a particular area, and you'll soon start to notice the experts in the field, because they will publish widely, and you get you can get a whole lot of background information. Yes, it's additional reading, but it's all part of your learning, and it can be really valuable. So any questions about those databases or how you've searched them? Your questions will probably arise when you're actually doing it yourself, which of course Ayako and I understand.
It's quite a good idea too to do what our librarians have been showing you, and that you're doing a broadish search to start with. I'll be talking later about narrowing down your questions, which you will be doing. But if you do one of these sort of broader searches using the keywords from the essay question, you'll actually find out where the areas are that have the information, because it's just a one semester 3,000 word essay with the annotated bibliography leading up to it. You want to do something that has information that's easy to get hold of. It's not a PhD or even a year-long master's project thesis, where you have time to search for things and to even do original research where there is a gap. You've actually got to pretty quickly be finding relevant material, so it's possible to then actually narrow down your essay question depending on what information you can find. So think about that as well. That might be the opposite way you think you'd go about it, but well worth doing that. And if you think you have a great idea for narrowing down your essay, but if you do a search, if you follow these searches that Ayako and Janet have talked about, and you can't find anything very easily, then I would say just change the focus of your essay a bit, because the time that you spend weeks upon weeks of trying to find relevant stuff where it might not even exist is going to then put a lot of pressure on you in the end.
Yes, I'm just going back to that Communications and Media Library Guide. Just going to quickly show you this Brain Literature tab. As you can see, news and newspapers, that's fairly obvious. We'll have a quick look at this. We'll have a quick look at that as well. And then there's another, what I think is a wonderful resource that might really help you doing your annotated bibliography and writing your essay. published the non-scholarly material that is still incredibly valuable. It is usually up to date and current, and a lot of authoritative expert people contribute to grey literature. That's what it's known as, but it's just a lot of websites, patents. I'll just quickly show you what it includes. Social media is regarded as grey literature. All of these examples, as you can see, lots, and there's lots of more explanations here, even evaluating it. You can just click through this at will if you like. I'm just going to show you some of the grey literature sites that you may have overlooked even in your module. The Conversation is a highly regarded Australian one that has lots of articles, reports written by experts, academics. Lots of Monash academics contribute to this, but it's still not, the content's excellent, but it's not peer reviewed. A panel of experts have not looked at this article and given it the tick of approval. But saying that, it's all really good stuff. The editors looked at it.
I'm so glad you mentioned The Conversation. I mentioned it in a comment as well. So the thing that I use The Conversation for, as well as it's fantastic reading on and lots of stuff on communications and media angles, but because it's written by academics, but it's written in a really accessible way. It's edited by journalists, so you can easily understand what it's about, but you also get the name of academics working in the field. So if they've written something on The Conversation that's in your field, you can often then get the name of that, again, the name of the author, and then search for the more scholarly articles that they've written on that topic, and chances are that they will have been published in that area. So I find this an easy way to quickly see who is writing in the field right now in terms of recent articles, and then go on and look for scholarly articles by them. You can still use information from The Conversation, but it doesn't, as Janet said, it doesn't count as a scholarly article, but it can still count as grey literature. You can still use it, but as I say, good idea to then see if they've done any scholarly work as well.
And as Corinne was saying too, it's written for the general public. It's not, because a lot of those journal articles are written for other experts. They're written for their peers often, and let's not pretend, some of them are hard going to read and understand all the concepts. The Conversation is written for the general public, so it's easily understood, and you are getting authoritative comment, and there's often links to further resources and a reference list as well. So it's a good, reliable source. Another one is Australian Analysis. It's an Australian site too. It has other international stuff, specifically more Asia Pacific, understandably. That has really good content as well. I'm just showing you the website. Look, you're getting some idea. Look at these reports if you're looking at a bit of climate change, as you can see. And very current, very recent, things that are timely, things that are in the news at the moment. And finally, there's many, and you may use international sites as well. And of course, the Australian Bureau of Statistics. That's very authoritative too. And they're adding more and more content that is useful for the general public and general reading. So that is what that is. Let's get out of grey literature. Back to the guide, the citing and referencing. Now, that was one, if you can recall, when we were looking at that big page of a whole lot of the library guides, and I suggested that this is one you'd be looking at. Undoubtedly you will. So it's the Harvard style. Commonly, I think you will be looking for examples from periodicals, the journals. Two authors, well, that's what you'll be looking for. Possibly websites, and maybe in the future, maybe not for these assessments, but how to cite social media, government sources, industry reports. So you should probably bookmark this right now, because I think you'll be referring to it quite a bit. And if in a couple of weeks, next week or the week after, you look at it and think, oh, this is a little bit different, it is being reviewed and updated. So you might see 2 Harvard tabs. Both are accurate, so don't be perplexed or wondering what on earth's going on. It's fine. How are we going for time? It's getting a little bit late. I just want to show you another really useful resource. It is called Research and Learning Online. Now, I'm back on the homepage. I'm scrolling down. Here's a library guides link. Here's Research and Learning Online that has a wealth of tips and advice, study guides about how to approach some of the requirements of tertiary study. Sort of academic language, writing styles. There's quite a lot in here, so if you've got, it's well worth having a browse, give you some good tips. I mean, Karan's going to give you a wealth of tips, but you can do this independently. You might want to look at critical thinking, how you analyse the content, the things that you're reading. There's various tabs here. Finding and evaluating, things like this. Academic integrity, which is really quite important. And one other thing that could be particularly helpful for this unit, and you haven't got a lot of time, you'll be finishing up before you know it. Assignment types, there are annotated bibliographies. We'll be doing that pretty soon. So this might be worth a browse. There's usually an activity to get you going, and of course the essay writing one as well. Just scroll across and go back because there's your 2 major pieces of assessment. So I'll stop there because if you're not, I'll stop sharing. And as I said, I know that we've demonstrated so much information, and the chat, oh yes, very nicely put, because I couldn't see chat from my screen. So all the links are there if you want to quickly cut and paste them and put them in the document. Should IARCO show the other languages and the other experts?
Oh, that would be good, yes.
And IARCO, could you please show the students how to get the Zoom help?
Yes. It's about to, yes, that's very important. I'll just share the screen. Is it this one? So we are in the citing and referencing page, but I just want to go back to the library homepage. Yes, as Janet said, this is always a good place to come back. So when you have, obviously, up down here, so library opening hours, on the very left side, there's an online drop-ins for students. So this is something like if you have a question while you're doing your writing, you want a quick question to ask, here's the place that you can go. And we have Zoom drop-in sessions from Monday to Friday, 12 to 5 p.m. You just need to click on this Zoom between those times, and there's a person over there that can you can talk to them and say what problem that you have. What we can offer is if you are having problem, how and where to start researching a topic. That's something that we can help. We can also help for finding resources, helping some keywords, or evaluating the source that you have found. We can also explain to you how you can look for the library search or databases or websites. And also what we have also talked about, the citing and referencing, it becomes very specific, so we can go and look together and see what's the best way to put according to the style. So these are the main questions that you can ask between 12 to 5 at the moment.
And it can be something something's a scholarly source or not. You're just not sure. You can just try going into the drop-in sessions. You're able to go on just to ask a 1-minute question if you want. It doesn't have to be anything complex or requiring 15 minutes.
Yes, that's right. It's about 10 to 15 minutes per person. You'll be allocated, and then you go back and you work on your own. And if you still have a question, you can always come back again. You have as many as you want. And Janet and I are sometimes rostered on this drop-in session, so you might see us. But if you want to talk with us on the library guides under communication and media, we have our name here, and you can just click and send us an email. That's just another way of, we might not be immediate respond, but we will get back to you.
Thank you. That's very generous of you both. Thank you.
The other one that I want to mention a bit about is if you are looking for Asian resources, or we have Asian collections in Matheson Library in Clayton, and we have, other than me, we have language specialists, studies specialists here. So under collection, special collections. Oh, sorry, I went one further. It's under collections. So under collection, we have Asian collection website. We have 4 big Asian resources. One is Indonesian, Rennie is looking after, and we have Japanese collection that I am responsible for, and Xiaoju, who is looking after Chinese collection, and Jumsim, who is looking after Korean collection. So anything when you come across to search, do a research about these countries, you are always welcome to talk with any of us.
And so that's really useful to know. And we do have some Japanese speakers within our unit. So generally with sources, so although you'll be dealing with the scholarly sources will be English language, sometimes your topic might take you, particularly if you speak Japanese or Chinese or Indonesian, you might want to use some media sources, for example, in these languages, or even from the countries they have English language media. So this is where your subject librarians here would be extremely useful and helpful to you to give you advice if you think you might like to look at this area. Thank you.
Yes. Just talking about the news and media, there's lots of newspapers as well. Just going back to the library page, under news and newspapers. These are the lists that major newspaper database that you can use. Factiva is Australian and also international wide. So quite a lot of Asian newspaper articles. You can type in the language and you can find the newspapers from there. Another big one is called Newsbank newspaper, Access World News Research Collection. That's another big one, international wide. So any of these one you can use as a database, and you can look up on the full text straight away. Yes, and some other information down here. I thought there's a library guide as well, so I'll just go to show you the newspaper library guide here. So there's today's news that you can straight go into, and there is a world map that if you are looking for the countries one. And on the left-hand side, the 2 database that I just mentioned, that Australian and international wide, they have each tab that have information, and some search tips are written there. So these are another sources that you can use.
And this is plastic source, even with a wider application for work in this unit, but many newspapers are behind paywalls, and it's annoying when you can't get the story. The library has access, paid subscriptions on your behalf to very, very many of these newspapers you otherwise wouldn't be able to read. So it's just a matter of going through the right section of the library database here and finding them, and in most cases you'll be able to locate them.
Yes, I'll just stop sharing this screen. Is there anything else? You have questions? We gave you a lot of information today. I hope you slowly digest. We gave you lots of links as well.
We have one question. Are there any restrictions or regulations regarding the publication date of newspapers? I'm presuming you mean, do you? Or
restrictions and sorry, what public?
I think you mean, no, you can get the daily news. Is that what you meant? Especially of the Australian newspapers, it's loaded daily. Is that what you meant? There's no restrictions.
And if you meant historical, so there are also sites such as just before the site Trove, Trove, there was a link there to it, which has old Australian newspapers actually going back to early 19th century, so going back centuries. So if that's what you mean, but there shouldn't be any restrictions regarding publication date. If you mean the dates that you can use, do you mean are you able to explain? Do you mean the dates you can use sources? Is that the dates you can use sources? So that depends on what you're doing. Generally, for those sort of classical theorists that we've been looking at in our readings, it's okay if they're quite old sources. But if you're, say, looking at social media, you then want to move from those more classical theorists to whatever is most recent in the research or more recent. So that you would have a variety of sources. So particularly use, as we've seen today, your filters for dates. So check out what are the most recent. So for example, if you were answering the essay question on COVID-19, obviously you want to check out 2020 and 2021 first. And then you can go back further and, as a comparison, look at other pandemics. So, but always the more recent, and at least, for your essay, that you should have some very recent sources. But I can talk to you more about that. All right. Any other questions for our librarians? Sure. All right. Well, Janet and Ayako, thank you so much, not just for today, but for the other three classes that you came into this week. It's a big ask, and we're so grateful for you for coming in. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. So
it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, everyone, and be in contact if you need any assistance. And we, on behalf of Ayako and myself, we wish you really well with these two assessments, and I'm sure you all will do well. So goodbye.
Thank you very much. Have a good week. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, so don't go anywhere. I think, yeah. So we are still continuing our class. We're going to have a break now, a much-earned break. So about just over 15 minutes, we'll come back to class at 3:45. And as I say, we'll go into assessments then, and then we'll look at this week's topic, political economy. So go have a cup of tea or whatever, and I'll turn my video off now and see you in 15 minutes.
加菜吗？
啊，
不加菜吧？
不加菜。
几点啊？
25，
那我先遛狗去了啊。行，这是柳七米，遛完7米回来再说。我给煎了鸡蛋。晚上咱们老回家干馅饼吧，晚上。
锅油。
information was useful to you. I know it is a lot of information, but there's so much. It makes life so much easier if you know how to use it. And it's really lucky to have the librarians to come along, because eventually when you muddle along, you do find most things eventually, but it's really good for them to tell us, and do take them up on their offer if you would like to contact them. If you can't find their emails, then just send me an email and I'll happily give you their email address, or do take advantage of the library function where you can just drop in for a consultation. So now what I would like to do is have a look at the assessments. You can see the screen shared there. And please, if you do have any queries, just sing out, talk out, or put them in the chat. I've got the chat open as well. All right, so with the assessments, Assignment 1 is something that most of you are already doing. It's great to see that most of you are keeping up with the week-to-week work. There are just a very few people who haven't been, but just to remind you that you do need to have that all done by March the 26th. That is the Friday of week 4. So if you're not quite up with that, make sure you do keep up. It will save you a bit of angst at that week 4 time. So also that week 4 reflection activity. So the reflection we're going to look at first today, and I actually have a sample to show you in a moment. So just going further down, so where to find the weeks 1 to 4 online activities. So the other assignments are on this assessment page. It's just to go back, it's that one there, assessment, except for weeks 1 to 4. Obviously the online activities you've found those, most of you, and the reflection is also on week 4. You'll find that the reflection also either within the module or just below it. It's the link that takes you to the same place, so it's the same one, so just different ways of getting in there for your convenience. So the reflection, which is here, week 4 reflection, so should be towards the top of your screen now. As I've said, is 200 to 300 words. It's actually worth 10 points. So it's not 1 point or 2 points. So that tells you that although it's short, 200 to 300 words, it actually requires quite a lot of thought to be put into it. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. And it's asking you to outline what you see as the most positive outcome of digital technologies in our communications environment and the greatest challenge. So just pick one of each of those. Now how you structure this is really up to you. There's no set way of structuring it. In the sample I'll show you in a moment, the student separated those two. So they had the most positive outcome, they used that as their heading, and then they do the greatest challenge. That is absolutely fine. Within those subheadings you would write in full sentences. The tone for this is, I'd call it semi-formal. It's not as formal as an essay, but it's not as informal as, say, a text. So the tone is actually very similar to your introduction that almost all of you have written your introduction, and you'll notice in there that students were conversational without being too casual. So that's a good way of looking at it. So you still, as I said, want to have sentences to answer each section, and you're not required to do any research particularly, except maybe to check your facts or something of that nature. You're not required to even include scholarly sources. This means, however, that everything has to be in your own words. So reflection is about your own thoughts, informed thoughts in relation to the topics of this unit. But if you do use any sources, you can if you want to. If you do use any sources, then make sure that you do reference them properly in the Harvard style. So you would then need to include a reference list at the end of your post to your 1 or 2 sources you use, and in-text citations. I prefer you do not use any quotations, because quotations are just the words of others. So we're actually looking at the thoughts and words of you. You could use a directly quoted phrase or a few words. So, for example, if you're saying, say, referring to the great theorist Marshall McLuhan, and you want to talk about the global village. So he was the person who coined that term in the 1960s. So you might put Marshall McLuhan's The Global Village in inverted commas. That's probably well enough known that you wouldn't need to bother finding the source and, that sort of thing. It's probably okay just to refer to it. But if you're referring, as I said, to anything in particular in readings, then do reference it. However, there's not really a need to do that, even for your examples. So normally in an essay, you would need to provide a source as evidence for examples, even quite well-known ones, not examples like, World War II went from 1939 to 1945. That's an established fact, and you never have to reference that. But, other examples that you use, that information from sources in an essay, you have to source them. But however, in this post, as you'll see in the sample, you can refer to examples. And if you're not talking about specific details, we're not wanting you to waste the words on summarising particular events. Just refer to them as examples. So I'm just having a look at my notes here. All right, so now I'll actually stop the share and share something else, which is the sample. So I've got a lot of documents up on my screen, so I'm just going to find the right one here. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, when I put this on, I'll just give you a few minutes to read it. And I'm not putting it up digitally because it's a privacy matter, but if you want to take a photo of it for your reference, something like of that nature from your home, that's fine, you can do that. So don't worry about that, but it's not going to be on Moodle. So here it is. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to read that, and then I'll talk more about it. Yeah, so you could take a screenshot of that if you wanted to. So I'll just go into that a little more. So at first glance, when you read that, you can see it's well written. It's very simply written. The student, this is an HD, so the student received, I think, 9 out of 10 for this. So it's simply written. It's easy to understand. They're not trying to be academic or scholarly. They're simply saying in some sentences their answer to each question. So you'll notice that they start off by clearly explaining what the positive outcome is. Digital technology integrates multiple modes of communication. Very simple, straightforward. Straight away, your marker says, good point. For example, then a good example. And then secondly, another reason it's a positive outcome. And example. And they are global examples too, from several different places. And if you read further down, you'll notice that the student actually uses some of those key terms from our unit from the weekly content. So I'm just trying to find some here. So towards about a third way down that first one, regional and national restrictions. That's something we've looked at. It's very clever in that the student has taken these key words into personal communication. Go down to the second one, the greatest challenge. Again, states clearly then explains what they mean, and uses terms such as fragmented information we use, online platforms, gatekeeping. You'll see there under the greatest challenge, about 6 lines down, gatekeeping. That is a term that we use, that I use in one of the lectures, and that was used last semester as well when this was submitted. Monopolies, we look at monopolies. Then they have an example, a global example in Alibaba. And again, then going further down, corporations, we talk a lot about corporations and profit. We talk about democracy and the internet. That's quite a concern. Regulatory challenges. So that's something that's the subject of at least one of the lectures. Policies and regulations, again, copyright and privacy is actually on one of the slides in a lecture. And then finally, the digital divide has increased. So digital divide is one of those terms that's in the lecture material. We'll be covering it in tutorials, and it's actually the subject of one of the essays. It's a bit like, if you apply for a job, you look at the description of the job and the job ad, and you take those. The way to do it is to take key words from the ad and incorporate them into your application. Number one, if they use software, if there's a lot of applicants, they sometimes use software to see who's used keywords. They do. You'll get in. And number two, once a real person actually reads your application, they can see, this applicant has actually read and understood what our company does, what sort of job we're advertising, what we require, because they've used the keywords. So the same thing in your reflection is that you've shown that you've really paid attention in the week to week. There's only 4 weeks of content, but you've paid attention to this and you've incorporated it in the positive outcome and the greatest challenge. So I'll go back to the general assessment section. Are there any questions about that? Any questions about the assignment 1, assessment 1 at all through all of that? Don't be shy to ask if you have a question, even if it's something simple. Okay, so that all seems to be very clear.
I have a question, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
So the requirement that the word restriction is 200 to 300, and how many words I can exceed over 300?
Yep.
Yeah.
The usual 10%.
Mm-hmm.
So 200 to 300 words. You could have as few as 180. That would be really short. But some people can make their points in that, and you could have up to 330 words. And the software on Moodle will count the words. You don't need to count the words yourself. I do advise you though to write your post separately and then copy and paste it. Don't just write it straight on. That's a better way to do it. Any other questions? All right, so what I'll do now is go back to the screen sharing for Moodle. Just take me a moment to find that with all the documents, loads and loads of documents. Okay, there we go. All right, so moving on to the annotated bibliography. So I think I've mentioned before you can do assignment 2, you need to choose your essay question that is from assignment 3. So you don't need to have narrowed down your assignment question, your essay question to exactly. You can still have it as that broad question. So one of those 5 questions, I'll be doing that. And in your bibliography, you'll be stating, of course, which one you're answering, which question you're answering. And so it's quite straightforward again. It's engineered in such a way that it helps you start with the broad research for your essay. Now, of the 5 sources you choose, you will probably use them in your essay. There are some circumstances where a student might not incorporate all of those 5 sources from the annotated bibliography in their essay. That's actually fine, it's not a requirement, but all of the 5 have to at least be on the topic that you are choosing. Okay, so then you write a separate piece of 200 words per annotation, so to add up to 1,000 words. Again, there is a plus or minus allowance of 10%, so 100 words. Just to note, a student asked a good question in a forum during the week, so I've actually added some information here that the word limit does not include the bibliographic details of each reading, and just further down there under task, at the end of task, at the start of each annotation, list the bibliographic details of the article. So just put a listing of what it is, and with page numbers. You need to use in-text citations, and I've got a link to the library, the Harvard Referencing Guide. Now I've also got to share with you on chat, which I'll just bring up here. Okay. This is what you'll be answering in the 200-word annotation. I actually might add these also. It wasn't traditionally in the annotated bibliography instructions, I don't think, but I think I might add them. But just take a note of those, copy and paste them somewhere today, so that each annotation in your 200 words, what is the article about? Very similar to what we did last week. What is the argument? What conclusion does the author make? What are the limitations? Can anyone tell me what sort of things I would need in limitations? What are we talking about here? What do I mean by limitations? You can type it in the chat. Any idea what a limitation would be in an article? Think about the date of the article. Think about the type of research. What could be a limitation? Relevance. Good one. Thank you, Bharat. Yeah, so relevance, can you explain a little bit more how relevance might come into it?
I think when it comes to the date range, I think it shouldn't be more than, as you said, if you're using some classical theories, then it's fine for us to use, some of the oldest ones. But if you're using something like social media or, something related to pandemic or something that happened in the past, few years, it'd be best if you stick to, that particular date range rather than going backwards, because, maybe if you're talking about television and if you're taking some theories that was done before the advent of television, then it's not really relevant, I think.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So date's really important with relevance, but you can still use older sources, some older sources, but you would mention, as you said, particularly if you're talking about social media, something that's some of our readings that are 5, 6, up to 10 years old, but it's for the theoretical concepts that you're using in them. And you might say, but a limitation is that social media use has changed in the last number of years since this was written, so that's a limitation. You don't have to go into them very thoroughly. You just have to mention. Thank you. So we have another one, theme related. So can you explain a little more what you mean by theme related?
So I mean, if you want to see write something that was close to your theme, not about the others. That's what I mean.
Yes, thank you. Very good. So sometimes, for example, say if you were writing about COVID-19 communications during that time, but you couldn't, but the article you've got is something to do with the communications in the time of SARS, then it's a slightly different topic, and but the themes might still be the actual themes might be related, but the limitation might be that it's from a different event or a different time, and that would be a limitation, and that it wouldn't be exactly the same. Yes, good answer. Whether the information in the article is up to date, yes. To go on from what Bharat said, that certainly that is absolutely something, probably the most important limitation in media essays or media sources. So also looking at the method. So, for example, and where the research was conducted. So sometimes research is very geographically situated. So it might be, as we saw during the library presentation, it might be something that was done in Brazil, but you're actually writing about, New Zealand or something. So you can apply, but a limitation would be that, people aren't necessarily the same. And that could be a limitation. Also, the number of subjects. So say if you're reading an article that the author has done qualitative interviews with 5 people, then they've made assumptions based on that. A limitation, which often the authors will say themselves, so you can find them in the article themselves, will say, it's only 5 people. It's an initial piece of research. The sample size is very small, so it's debatable whether we can actually make any assumptions based on that. But it gives an indication. It's a start to something. We have another. Amber says the identity of the author, such as different parties' beliefs, may lead to different views. Yes, if you think that is relevant. So anything you think might be relevant. So yes, if it's written by someone who has very strong views in one area and they're published in that area, and you know that they have very strong views, that might be a limitation. Authenticity, Alfie says, well, authenticity can be a limitation, but and you're right, it's a very big limitation. So what I would suggest is please use sources that do not have a problem with authenticity. So if you're so for the 5 annotated bibliography items, do check on their authenticity, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's very important that they're those from the peer-reviewed scholarly journals. Again, if you doubt the authenticity, then make sure that you do check it with library staff by dropping in, or you can send me an email. But take advantage of that drop-in capability. But authenticity, very important before you go ahead and use an article. All right, so thank you for all those suggestions. So just going back to what else I put in here. All right, so it's hard to look at, right, okay. Limitations. The 4th thing to put in your annotation is, how is this related to your own essay topic? Okay, so at this stage, again, it doesn't need to be a lot of information. You just need a sentence or 2 clearly explaining why you've chosen this in relation to the question you're answering. So, I've chosen this this article because I'm answering question 4, and this is about digital media. I'm just going down question 4 here to remind myself again. This is about digital communication systems, this article, and It's about the public sphere, you know, and so therefore it's relevant to what I'll be talking about, or something of that nature. So just to show that you've actually linked the two. This assignment, as I said, is supposed to help you with research towards your essay. So all of the research you use in this, you can use in your essay. An annotated bibliography is not like a literature review. So a lot of you might be more familiar with a literature review, which is what you do in a longer essay or a piece of original research, which is looking at the relevant research, the key research in the area, and analysing it. In an annotated bibliography, you're not doing very much analysis. You're really showing that you know how to select relevant sources, that you know how to actively read them so you get the gist of them, what they're about, what the argument is, what the conclusion is, and that you can relate them to your own assignment work, and you can say how they're relevant. You're not just choosing anything just because, you know, you think that might be interesting. It's got to be interesting and relevant. Are there any questions about annotated bibliography? No questions? All right, let's move on to your research essay. So as I said, you should actually be choosing, everybody should, you know, by the next few days have chosen their essay question. They're fairly straightforward questions. They are quite broad questions. So the difference, for those of you especially who are starting your master's journey, the difference between undergraduate and master's level work is that we're expecting more of a depth of engagement with the question. So at an undergraduate level, not all undergraduate, but some undergraduate students do very in-depth work, but generally, you know, say if it's that question 2, the digital space was supposed to be a great equalizer, you might write a general response to that question without really narrowing it down anymore. It's more that, you know, that breadth of looking at lots of different sources and just answering a question. At master's level, you're often used to interpret a question and to narrow its focus. So you'll be looking at the question and thinking, you know, there's a lot to say here. What am I most interested in? So choose an area. This might be a case study, or it might be a geographical location or a comparison, or one aspect of it. So if the question talks about social media, which social media? It's huge, you know, you can't do everything. So specify which media you'll be looking at. These are also limitations. So it's called the scope of your essay. We'll be looking at this in more detail as we go along, but you're setting the scope of your essay. And you can actually say in your introduction, you know, this essay will look at, but these things are beyond the scope of this essay. So that's a good phrase to know, beyond the scope of this essay. A bit like doing a library search and excluding some things, not this. So to let your marker know that you haven't forgotten about that area, but it is not something that you'll be looking at. You'll find that writers of academic articles will do that all the time, because generally they're looking, the higher up you get in academic work, the more narrow is your focus, until, you know, you get to a PhD, which is 100,000 words on quite something that's often quite narrow. I hope that you can find in these questions something that interests you. If you think that the way that you're wanting to define the scope might be getting away a little bit from the question, just send me an email, ask me. You know, in most cases I'll try to accommodate your interests. We do ask you to respond to one of the questions though, and not just kind of make up your own. So you'll find that some of the important issues that we cover in the weekly content from weeks 1 to 4 are talked about here. So in the first question there, about the COVID-19 pandemic, I added this. I've actually rewritten all the questions from last semester, but this is a completely new area because I thought there have been a lot of effects on this. Some of you will like to do that. Some of you will want to get right away from talking about COVID-19. That is understandable as well. But you're looking at one of the following areas. So you've got the list there: education, work, business, creativity, travel, health. But then you'll be narrowing it down even further. So they in themselves are big areas. Some examples I can think of in, say, health, for example, and remember also that you're focusing on the communications angles, not the disease itself. So example in health might be messages in media about vaccinations or about a particular type of vaccination. Okay, so for example, something I can think of is that China and Russia have both were very, very effective and were very fast at getting vaccinations out. There is hardly any of this in media in Australia, and Australia hasn't bought either of those. But, it's interesting that there's very little said about that in Australian media, and yet in other places of the world there might be quite a lot said, and they're distributing the vaccinations at a huge rate. I mean, you look at the number of people in China, for example, who have been vaccinated already. It's amazing. It's amazing. So, but you're not looking at that particularly, but you would be looking at maybe government messages. Or with vaccinations, you might be looking at social media messages. You might be looking at how the anti-vaccinators are sending disinformation. And you might look at a particular group, or you might look at a particular claim. For example, I just heard on the radio that some anti-vaxxers are claiming that vaccinations give you autism. That's an old one that's, been around in connection with other vaccinations. So, or you might, I used this example before, and I might have told you in class, another example from a health point of view is government messages, or you don't have to do government, you can do other types of messages, popular media messages about mask wearing. So I've used this before. As I say, a student did a really interesting essay comparing government messages in the US, China and Australia, and they have changed. That was quite a larger essay. So in this small essay, you might, for example, want to look at messages about mask wearing from WHO, the World Health Organization, during the COVID-19 crisis. Go to their website, also find where they're quoted, the organization is quoted in newspaper articles, that sort of thing. That's just one small area. Creativity and or the arts. So we have a few people who are very interested in music. If you were, say, interested in orchestra playing, you might have noticed that during this time, particularly during 2020, when there were a lot of lockdowns, that of course many orchestras could no longer perform. An orchestra performs in front of a live audience, and it's wonderful, and people go. It's a social event. That couldn't happen. And it changed in that you could still see orchestras, but they used Zoom and other types of technology to mount different types of performances. And but the problem is it was very hard to monetize that or to get money from that. But there are a few interesting models. But you could start thinking about if that's what interests you, or other live music performances. It could be any sort of music. Getting a message out there also. So hip hop is often very good for looking at getting social messages across. How did hip hop artists do this during the pandemic? And there is already quite a lot of scholarly work on this area. Okay, so I'm not going to go too much into all of these different questions. They're fairly straightforward. So digital space was supposed to be the great equalizer. So we look at that in, I believe, week 4 material. So to what extent is this idea now defunct? Defunct meaning no longer relevant, doesn't happen anymore. And you'll see, and then in question 3 is about the digital divide. So the digital divide is about the haves and have-nots, again in the week 4 lectures. Looking at, whether people are left behind if they don't have access to digital material. Again, you could look at one small place or one small area that is written about in the media and that has been analysed. So you can also drop into my consultation sessions if you want to talk particularly about your essay. So remember that you can do that Tuesdays and Fridays 11 to 12. So question 4, we've got digital communication systems. So this has got the example of the public sphere in it. So remember we talked about the public sphere in the first week, and you want to choose a strong example or examples. So a case study, if you're using a case study, that would be looked at as a thread through the whole essay, whereas if you're looking at examples, they might be sustained examples, but you can look at several of them, and they might not be referred to through the whole essay, but they're examples of part of it, which is the difference. And then the 5th one is for those of you who are interested in regulation of the digital environment. So there's quite a lot, again, in the lecture material about that. And that one you're particularly encouraged to use a case study. So are there any questions about the essay? Of course, we can have a time at the end of the next few weeks. And in week 5, I talk about academic writing of the essay. And week 6 is editing and finishing the essay. Okay, so, and again to remind you that on that assessment section you have the due dates of everything there and the value of them. So I'll stop sharing that one. I just also wanted to alert you to the rubrics. Does everyone know what a rubric is? So some people are shaking their heads. A rubric, R-U-B-R-I-C, I think, which is not to be confused with Rubik's Cube, which is something different. But a rubric is like a grid for marking. You'll notice on the assessment site that so assignment 1 doesn't have a rubric. You just get a mark. Assignment 2 and 3 both have rubrics. So I'll show you what I mean. Again, I'll share the screen. Okay. Right, so and this is really good because it gives you to have a look at this, because it gives you a really fair idea of how your work is going to be marked. So you can see that one there is assignment 2, annotated bibliography. So what I suggest you do, it's a lot to read, but really they're just grades on the same thing. So if you look down, the left column is the HD column, what you're aiming for. So to get an HD in this assignment, you would have to get the majority of highlights in this column. So you can see what we're looking for. There's 3 areas here. They'll both be given the same weight within the assignment. We'll just highlight in each section. You won't get a separate mark for each separate section. So you'll see a highlight, whichever section applies to you. I'd use this like a checklist. So, as you go along, especially towards the end when you're almost due to submit, go back into it and, did I select a wide variety of relevant and quality scholarly sources? 3 of my sources are pretty much on the same thing. I wonder if I could find another one that might be a bit different. Just an idea. That you summarize and evaluate relevant information. So that evaluate meaning that you evaluate it in terms of its limitations and also in terms of its value to your own essay. Academic rigor and depth. All right, so that means that you've got this scholarly sources that you've thought about the essay topic as a scholarly topic. You haven't just sat there and, rattled off any old thing, but you're really thinking deeply about this in a scholarly way. And so on. I won't go through it all, but there is also, so stop sharing that, and I will now go on to the other one just very briefly. Which is the essay rubric. I know it's really small on your screens, but you can access it yourself. So this is for the essay. You'll see, so each of these sections on the left-hand side, marking criteria, has the same weight, so it's worth the same. So you can see how important, say, your academic writing is. It has the same value in this assignment as your argument and your use of sources and the structure of your essay. They're pretty straightforward essay writing skills. There's nothing tricky or anything of that nature in this. It's straightforward because this is a foundation unit. So we really want you from the start. This is the start of your master's degree, from the start to get the hang of what it's like to write an academic essay in this field, which could be different to what you've done before. If you've done lots of essays before in communications, that will be pretty similar, but just check to make sure that it is the same or similar. And and some of you are taking this as an elective, so you will most probably, if you're in a similar field, you'll most probably know how to write an essay. But some different fields are very different. You might have been writing reports, for example. So make sure that you have a look at those library resources, drop into the library, come and see me in a consultation if you're not sure. Okay, so I'll stop the share now. I'm just going to get rid of some of those things on my screen because there's so many of them. Okay, so, all right. Okay, so we don't have that much time left today, but today was a one-off with the library, but I'm going to try and roll along to this week's topic, looking at political economy. So let's just first off do the poll. So something for you to do. I'm going to, for those of you who weren't here last week, I launched a poll which has got 3 basic questions. I'll do that in a minute. It's anonymous, so I won't know who's answered what, and just give your best answer, and then we'll go through the answers, basic concepts from this week's political economy section. So I'll launch now and give you a couple of minutes to answer that. You should see it on your screen now. So just one more minute for those of you still looking at the questions. One more minute. Just a couple more students to go. I will close it just in a couple of few seconds. So if you're just still going, just put in the answer you think might be most relevant. So nearly everyone's voted. Just got one more. All right, I'm just about to end the poll. You got your vote in, very good. All right, end the poll and share results with you. Okay, so on the first question, the best definition of the political economy approach, the vast majority of you got that. As you can see, it is analysis of who owns and controls media and the effects of this. So I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. The second one, a little bit divided, but it's researchers examine in relation to media concentration. They're looking at centralisation of media industry ownership, and 57% or 13 of you got that correct. So remember that we're looking at, in media concentration, looking at how media ownership is concentrated into just a few people owning large corporations and the effects of that. Now, in question 3, you were quite divided, but narrowly the majority of you chose the correct answer, which is the first one there. So an area among concern criticising the rise of media conglomerates is that prioritising making profits, making money might negatively affect the media as a public good. So that's not a fact. It's an argument that scholars use when they're criticising the rise of media conglomerates. So the other two there, big corporations at risk of hostile takeover bids, well, yes, they always are. But and this can come into some analysis, but not so much into if you're criticising the rise of media conglomerates. And similarly with, the challenge from independent companies, it's generally the argument is sort of the other way around, that media conglomerates don't allow independent companies to have a voice, that it's very difficult in a field that is dominated by great big media companies. Remembering that a great big company can often take a few hits much easier. So, you might be able to get through a COVID year of a downturn in sales, but a small company will not be able to get through that at all. Okay, so stopping sharing now. So looking at political economy, And just a few points to go on from the lecture material. If you're interested in this area, you can say that political economy is one of the oldest among the theoretical movements that led media studies as an academic discipline. It's quite an early discipline, so it's sort of only been in universities in Australia and New Zealand for maybe 30 years, maybe not even that long. It goes back a bit longer than that as a discipline to, say, around the 1920s and 30s, so 100 years. That sounds like a long time, but in the context of a field of research, it's really not. If you think of some other fields of research, such as theology, so religions have been studied for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. For example, linguistics and that sort of study, much older studies. So we could trace political economy to the Frankfurt School in the 1920s and 30s. And it's interesting, if you're using theoretical material, we'll talk about this later, like in week 5, how to do that. But if you're using material, it's often quite good to go back briefly to a historical context. So in political economy, you might mention the Frankfurt School in Germany in the 1920s and 30s, moving on to the United States. This is mentioned in the week 3 material, so if you're interested in this area, we mentioned the Frankfurt School then. So the key idea is that the economic structures in media industries have influences and effects on culture. So it matters. The economic structures are not just about money, they actually affect the way that media behave and therefore the culture. So this is particularly so in studies into inequality. So we've got those terms such as digital divide. We look at that in week 4 and the subject of one of our essay questions. So researchers consider class systems, how certain groups are privileged, whereas others are restricted from entering, a bit like what we discussed last week in Habermas's public sphere, and that his original idea of the 18th century coffee houses actually was very exclusive if you look at it. So it locked out women, working classes, people of colour for a start. So, the majority of your population did not get entree to a coffee house. But Habermas, if you remember, said, no, but that's not what this is about. I agree with you, but it's about once you enter that, once you get entree to that. But critics would say with the digital divide, but you can't even be a contender unless you can get in. You're actually, so is it useful looking at only who's in? You have to, from a political economy perspective, particularly what's called critical political economy, is you have to look at the have-nots as well as the haves. Which doesn't happen in every study, of course. Any study of a lot of studies of the internet and of social media assume as an entry point that you can get access to that media. So researchers using a political economy approach are interested in the systems that produce media. So if you remember that word systems, company hierarchies and ownership, labour, industrial relations with workers in that industry. They're also thus interested in representation in media, which we look at next week, based on the backgrounds of those who produce media. So if you look, for example, at journalism, in Australia and New Zealand, overwhelmingly has been historically carried out by white middle class men. There are a lot of women in the field now, but not so much in areas of control. Just last year, a study looked at the heads of broadcasting outlets in Australia and found that the vast majority were headed by men, and by white men, white middle-aged or older men. So political economists say that actually matters to what we eventually end up with as the content of the media. Even if you have individual people who aren't in that sort of clique, it still influences. So the control of the media, who has control, actually influences what eventually comes out of that media in terms of content. Okay, So moving along, we don't have enough time to go into breakout rooms this week, unfortunately, but I wanted to just to finish off. I had a lot of questions. I might actually put them in the chat in case they're useful to you to think about if you're interested in this area. So these were the questions. I didn't think we would probably get to them, but maybe we can look at question 3 there. People tolerate billionaires in other spheres, but are much more critical of wealth gained from media. This is on page 4. Why do you think this might be? What are some examples of public criticism of commercial media? Can you think of any examples to tell us? I know it's hard to think of something just straight away. Perhaps while you're thinking about that, I'll talk about one, and then it might bring up other ideas for you. But examples of people really being very critical of media. So a few years ago, I think back 5 or 6 years ago, the scandal came to light in the UK about phone hacking. Have you heard about phone hacking? The phone hacking scandal in the UK. Anyone heard of that? Yes, Karen has. Karen, do you remember what that was about?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, in the UK, sorry, my dogs are barking. In the UK, there was an issue around people being. I can't remember the detail. There was an issue around. It was a privacy breach, I think. There was something around that. They had gone in and done something completely inappropriate and pushed someone over the edge. That's not a lot of detail, but
that's a good start. So the phone hacking scandal, it started actually with journalists in Murdoch-owned publications, so very popular publications such as News of the World, journalists paying people to hack into people's phone messages, celebrities to start with, to get stories. And this was found out because to do with the princes of England, William and Harry, that something was published that you could only know if the phone had been hacked, and they found this out. But, to start with, people weren't that concerned. I mean, people were going, oh, shock, horror, that's a dreadful thing to do. But people, it was only rich, powerful celebrities who were involved. And people just go, you're rich and powerful, you can handle it. But as Karen was saying, an incident that actually changed everything was called the Millie Dowler, Dowler, Millie Dowler case. The Millie Dowler case happened when a little 14-year-old girl was murdered, and before that was discovered, she was missing. And in those days, I think this is early 2000s, in those days you would have a message bank on your mobile phone that would become full until you emptied it. I don't know if any of you remember that situation, but yeah, so a couple of you do. So and when you emptied it, someone who rang in could then leave a message, but they would get a message, this voice box is full currently, full, or something like that. Anyway, Millie Dowler's parents, the little girl's parents, were obviously frantic. She'd gone missing for no reason, so they kept ringing her mobile phone number. And at first it said, this message box is full. The next time they rang, they could leave a message, please come home. Then they thought, she's okay because she's answering her messages. It was discovered that that wasn't the case. She was in fact dead, and the reason her parents thought she was still alive was because the press had been going into her message box, hacking her phone, going into the message box and looking for information in the messages. The public in the UK went wild about this. This wasn't a famous person, wealthy person, rich people, whatever, although I fully believe they have a right to privacy in life as well. But this was an ordinary family going through a terrible, awful tragedy, a little girl murdered, and the press had made their experience worse. This led public pressure to the closure of the News of the World newspaper after 156 years, to inquiry in Parliament, and to Rupert Murdoch, the Australian-American owner of a lot of the world's media, being described as, in Parliament in the UK, not a fit person to run a media company. Those sorts of examples of public pressure, do they change anything? Probably not a lot, apart from the newspaper closing. That's an example of what we're talking about in this reading, about people tolerating, all sorts of bad behaviour in other areas, but the media is still really held to account, even if it's commercial for-profit media. It's still considered that it is a public good in some way. That just shows you that, even though the Murdoch press exists to make money, they still are found by the public to have to have some ethics, some conscience, apart from the fact that it was illegal, what they were doing. So there was also that. All right, so there's lots of other interesting information to talk about from the reading this week. If you have any questions or want to talk about it some more, just drop in next Tuesday into my consultation session if you want to link it to something you're writing about in your essay. So just have a few minutes left. I'm just going to scroll down and make sure that I don't have another message for you. So next week is Module 3, Representation and Audiences. Note that there are 2 essential readings next week because we have 2 topics, so it's a little bit longer. There's more. There is more material. There are 4 mini lectures. Okay, any questions? That was a lot today. I know we went through a lot. Next week you will have much more chance to talk. Next week we will be in breakout rooms. Please do tackle both of the readings because we will make that a priority next week. Important readings to continue linking them to ideas that might be useful to you in your essay. So, all right, I'll just hang around in case some of you want to ask me something, but if you don't want to, thank you very much, everyone. I hope that this was useful today to you, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome, Karen.
See ya.
Bye.